And you got to realize that's the biggest load of horse crap you've ever heard in your life.
They took a poll in England of women, and 70% of them didn't want the vote. They thought.
I know, and the women in Saudi Arabia want the burqa. I know, it's because of the culture that they grew up in. Karen, give me a thank you. Look, everything's going great, but you're not being reasonable. You're being ridiculous. Give me a thank you. Give me a thank you for feminists for getting your right to vote. Otherwise, stop voting and go make me a ham sandwich.
I have no respect for women who voted for Trump, okay?
Yeah. Me too.
I think so poorly of them, and the reason why is because, look, I don't think that you're a single issue voter. I just think you're dumb, okay? I think you're fucking dumb. When you vote for someone who openly treats women like second-class citizens, who talks about them as if they're nothing more than a piece of meat, who has been accused of sexually assaulting them, who has been caught on tape talking about groping them and grabbing them by the pussy without consent, yeah, you're an idiot. You're an idiot, yes. Okay? You are voting against your best interests. I'm losing my mind tonight because of how stupid the majority of the country is.
Yeah,
you've got a party going on. You need the kids to stay occupied. That'll make this a lot more.
That's how I had to watch incest porn.
What?
You got to turn the sound down. Then it's just porn.
I'm so confused. Okay, or if you're on an airplane.
But I really want everyone to keep in mind that this is not a representation of all Muslims. However, when you come from a culture or a country that believes women should be covered, and if they're not covered, then they're asking for it, well, some chunk of those people are going to carry out acts of violence like this. It's really a huge cultural difference that needs to be addressed.
As far as Angela Merkel's perspective, you have to worry about the perception and what your citizens are going to think you're doing,
right,
and if there's an unsafe environment now been created. So you have to worry about that stuff. But you have to also not convey that because of who these people are, that this is why it's happening more.
Right.
I'm sure there's been plenty of assaults in Germany before this. This was a mass when it was New Year's Eve, maybe it was easy targets. All that type of stuff happens. So you can't just assume that just because this happened here, now this will end the problem. Because then if it happens again, what else do you have to do next?
Right. So I just want to get to those memes in just a second. But if the memes are something that you've come across and you did not find them offensive, also consider the fact that now there are events on Facebook encouraging people to jump off bridges in honor of Harambe. Now, these events are posted and created and meant to be a joke, but some are not too happy about it. So I'm going to give you a few examples. There's one that says, jump off the Harbor Bridge for Harambe, jump off Telstra Tower for Harambe. We don't encourage suicide, so that's kind of letting people know this is just a joke.
Well, they had to add that later because they were starting to worry that the people were taking it seriously. I'm glad at least they were worried about it.
Yeah, and so people were also tweeting about it. Lucas Zelasco says, we were just invited to mass suicide bridge jump for Harambe on Facebook. Should I RSVP for anyone else? So later on, the creators of these pages posted messages indicating, hey, you know what, this is just a joke. Please don't take this seriously. This is crazy. We don't want anyone to take their own lives as a result of what happened to Harambe. But what's equally disturbing to me is just the number of racist memes that emerged from this tragic story of a gorilla getting shot and killed at the Cincinnati Zoo. So I want to show you a few of those examples. These are the memes that eventually convinced the Cincinnati Zoo to delete their Twitter and Facebook pages. Another unarmed African American shot dead. Let's show you another example. They shot my husband.
That's a real person. Okay, that's so nice of them to do that.
I think that's Gabourey Sidibe, but I could be wrong.
I'm not sure.
Here's another example. What y'all think would have happened to this gorilla? Rest in peace, Harambe. And then let's show you another example. Remember that kid that jumped into the gorilla tank? This is him. Feel old yet?
Yeah. Really funny.
And then let's give you guys one more. All gorilla lives matter.
Okay, so BuzzFeed explains that 4chan started at least the bridge jumping stuff. And so at that point, I hadn't read into the racist Harambe memes yet. But as Anna can attest to, I predicted it. I was like, let's look into this because I bet that they're I would be surprised if people didn't take this in a racist direction, and of course they did. And so, okay, guys, look, I know that some people think racism is really funny, probably because they never suffered it, so they never got denied a house, they never got charged so much more money for financing, so whether it was financing a car or a house, and even though they're poor, they have to pay an extra penalty. They never dealt with that, so they think it's hilarious. And family members never got shot. So, haha, it's really funny. I mean, I can go on and on, right? Okay.
Have a non-player character in the video game that resembles Trayvon Martin. Now, the whole game's premise is basically about a hacker who's really, really angry, and he wants to seek revenge because of the accidental death of his niece. So what he does is he goes around town and he hacks into people's phones. One of the people, the non-player character that he hacks into, is someone by the name of Kayvon Fortin. And let me give you a quick description of Kayvon. Kayvon Fortin appears in the game as a 21-year-old drug dealer with the NPC's name bearing a strong resemblance to that of Martin's. He's also wearing a hooded sweatshirt, as was Martin at the time of his death.
Okay, I'm an old man at this point, and I'm confused by all these games. Get off my lawn, kids, okay? But as far as I understand, this could be random, but given the situation here and the hoodie and the fact that the names are so similar, it's clearly not random.
Yeah.
So somebody put that in the game. And if they wrote that in, why did they write it in? Well, there's really only two possibilities, and neither one of them that good. One is to get attention, right? But this game, from what I understand, is already doing really, really well. It's not the right way to get attention, right? And it only turns people off. Second of all, the second possibility is that it was malicious, because in the game, Kayvon Fortin is a 21-year-old drug dealer.
Yep.
And a bad guy.
He showed up as an attacker on a criminal convoy mission.
Now, the name Kayvon Martin Fortin, that's not a coincidence. That's not a
He's wearing
random.
a hoodie, yeah.
Rights. No, you don't need any stinking gay rights. He's going to get into a debate here with Zoe Turks. She's a transgender reporter. Now, he's the one threatening to take her rights away, right? So you can understand why she's a little touchy about that. If somebody was looking to take my rights away, I'd be pretty pissed, right? He's the one that's constantly, belittling her and saying, oh, I'm not hating you. I just think, I feel sad for you. Oh, you were born that way? I feel sad for you. Okay. So let's be clear on who started this. Okay. Apparently, according to Shapiro, Zoe Turks also said, you can cut that out now or you'll go home in an ambulance. Okay. Ooh, Ben got really scared from that. Big Bad Ben? Not exactly. Little Bad Ben? So then Zoe apparently said, I'll see you in the parking lot. And CNN security reportedly escorted the commentator to his vehicle. Okay, so let's pause right there. Now, look, things got a little heated. You shouldn't make threats like that. I get it, right? But I love how Shapiro's like, she called me a little boy. CNN, mommy, please help me. Gabriel, I'm afraid about going to my car. What? Wait, I thought you felt sad for her. I thought you were the tough guy. What? He was caught on tape also saying this. Well, you're not so tough anymore. That's weird. Okay.
Spent the night with Amy Schumer, certainly not the first guy to write that. # Critics' Choice Awards. Oh, now, Lord. Before we rip into him, he's 17. Yes. You have to understand that Amy Schumer is a very self-deprecating comedian. That's not to give anyone a green light to say whatever they want to say about her. You can't just be a misogynistic prick because...
Oh, again, his age certainly does add some context to it.
Yes.
And I think it was just stupid bro humor. I mean, ultimately, his dick wrote that joke. The testosterone, probably pumping through his veins. And the problem is that, and Amy Schumer's brought this up, that people call her a sex comic, have labeled her as such because she talks openly about sexuality and is, really genuine and candid about her experiences. And men do that shit all the time.
Right.
Male comedians are constantly doing that. And they're not called sex comics. But Amy Schumer is labeled a sex comic. And she's like, oh, a guy could come on stage and hold his dick and everyone would be like, "Oh, what a intellectual joke."
Yes.
And never receive that kind of, "Oh, we're gonna specify that all you do is talk about sex."
Donald Trump on whether he was mentally stable enough to be president of the United States. They don't mean that he has an illness or an ailment. They just mean, does he have the right temperament? This guy's going to have the nuclear codes. He could literally go nuclear, maybe over a tweet. Now, I think in regards to Donald Trump, that is an enormously fair question, given how he has reacted to other people, given how he gets angry and says outrageous things from time to time, whether it's attacking Republicans like John McCain, saying Megyn Kelly's bleeding from wherever. He says, if Putin is nice to me, I'll be nice to him, but if you're mean to me, I'll be mean to you. Well, being mean with nukes, which, by the way, he says he won't take off the table and might actually use. Oh, yeah. So his mental stability is a very good question and directly related to this election. So what do the Trump people want to do? Well, they wanted to strike back and go, oh, yeah? Well, I think she's got mental issues. And they started talking about how she once fainted and knocked her head and had a concussion, so that means maybe she's mentally unstable. And then she's ill, and then, oh my dear, she is, she's coughing. Now let's pause there for a second. What does a cough have anything to do with mental stability? Now, if she had a concussion back in 2012, well, she would show signs if it went terribly wrong and she's got issues, etc. Well, she debated Bernie Sanders about 28 times. She's been speaking throughout the country. She's given speech after speech. You would think that we would have seen that. But we haven't seen any evidence of that because that didn't happen. There is no mental issues with Hillary Clinton.
It's unbelievable. Now, before I read it to you, let me just make this note. Ron Paul supporters who say, hey, well, he didn't write it, somebody else did. Give it up, dude. Okay? I'm not interested in that defense at all. You're going to tell me that somebody let this kind of writing go on for decades in his name and didn't do anything about it? Even if he didn't write it, that he's not complicit in that? Oh, come on. You'd have to be an idiot or cult of personality obsessed fool to believe that Ron Paul didn't believe this stuff when he wrote it in the Ron Paul newsletter for decades and decades. So, you say, oh, well, how bad could it be? Well, let's...
So after he called her a slut on Facebook, she realized, well, I can probably click on his page and see what his identity is and maybe even see where he works. And sure enough, she did find out where he works. The original comment was posted by Nolan on November 25th in response to a post where Ford called out another man for making degrading comments. Clementine Ford says, I wonder if the folks over at Meriton Apartments are aware that a man listing himself as a supervisor for their business likes to leave comments on women's Facebook pages calling them sluts. She then went ahead and contacted the employer, and Nolan got fired. On the internet as a slut, as every negative, terrible word you can imagine, you should just sit there and take it. You shouldn't hold the person who's on a public forum insulting people accountable for his actions, because that would be unacceptable.
So Tariq Musa wrote about this on Daily Beast and pointed out some interesting things and saying, look, it's weird that people say freedom of speech. Now, first, of course, let's just get the obvious out of the way, which is freedom of speech is so the government can't take away your rights. So, and freedom of speech applies both ways. He has the freedom of speech to call her a slut, and the government can't lock him up. It doesn't mean that his employer can't fire him if he says that, if he had called.
Omari Akil from Medium wrote an interesting perspective on Pokemon Go and how some portions of the population get to enjoy and play the game in a way that maybe other portions of the population don't. So apparently he's concerned about people of color, black individuals specifically, playing Pokemon in a public place and appearing to be suspicious when in reality they're doing something as innocent as playing this game. He says, I spent less than 20 minutes outside. This is when he was playing his game. 5 of those minutes were spent enjoying the game. 1 of those minutes I spent trying to look as pleasant and non-threatening as possible as I walked past a somewhat visibly disturbed white woman on her way to the bus stop. I spent the other 14 minutes being distracted from the game by thoughts of the countless black men who have had police called on them because they look suspicious or wondering what a Second Amendment exercising individual might do if I walked past their window a third or fourth time in search of a Jigglypuff. So that's a really interesting perspective that I didn't really think of. So these are people who are going out in public places to play the game, right? That's the way it works. And for someone who doesn't know about Pokemon, doesn't think of Pokemon as the first thing, they might see an individual maybe pacing around, looking around, and think, oh my gosh, that person is super suspicious. And remember, you see something, say something. And who knows what that could possibly lead to.
April 24th is an incredibly important day for the Armenian community, and even though I'm out of town, I think it's beyond important to explain to you why the Armenian community gets together and usually protests on this day. So, 100 years ago, the Turkish government gathered hundreds of elite Armenians that were living in Armenia, and they slaughtered them. And the reason why they did it was because there was an uprising among the Armenian community under the Ottoman rule against the systematic discrimination of the Armenian community. So why was that happening? Well, there was a little bit of a religious war happening. Of course, there's a great deal of religious diversity in the area where Armenia exists today. And the Ottoman Empire, which of course was in favor of Muslim religion, did not like the fact that Armenians were Christian. The vast majority of Armenians were Christian then, and the vast majority of Armenians are Christian today. So they were allowed to practice their religion, but they were treated as second-class citizens as a result of that. Many of them were discriminated against, they were charged higher taxes, they were not allowed to ring church bells, they were fined if they practiced their religion in a certain way. And so as a result, a lot of them were very upset about this, and they were outspoken against it. So there are many nuances to this story that I unfortunately can't talk about in a short video. But to make a very long story short, Armenians who rebelled against this type of treatment were basically targeted against by the Turkish government. So